Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series.
Because creators are businesses.
What we do is not simple.
Give, the fans everything that they deserve.
Being creative
is like doing a 5,000 piece puzzle.
Is something that you can learn and do over and over again.
Always be as authentic as I can be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I am thrilled today to have Mr. Chris Dyer here with me. He is an entrepreneur, a culture coach, a leadership speaker, remote work expert, and a best-selling author. I am so excited to have him here with me today to jump into this world of company culture that he speaks so much about. So Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. I want to get into you hold all these titles, but company culture seems to be where you spend your most amount of time. One, just getting off and starting easy, what inspired your focus first on jumping into this big bucket of company culture that seems to be a topic that's everywhere right now?
Out of necessity. I mean, it'd be nice if I told you I decided to do this for some altruistic, debt to society that I wanted to change work. And I woke up one day and had an epiphany. No, it was that I was running my company and things sucked and our culture sucked. And I was like, we need to fix this. And we had grown, and what we were doing when we started wasn't working now that we had a lot more people and a lot more sophisticated operation. And so, when you're selling a couple $1,000s of stuff and now you're selling millions and millions of dollars of stuff, like it changes. And I was still trying to manage my people like my coaches managed me and my teachers managed me, my parents managed me, and that does not work. In fact, if you try to do that, your employees just turn into like petulant teenagers.
Yep.
And so I was like, cool, I'm going to change. I'm going to change the culture. There must be a blueprint. There must be like the exact thing on how you're supposed to do this. And there was lots of stuff out there. And I think it was more like around engagement. It was more about inclusion or diversity. The pieces were there, but I felt like I couldn't find for me a blueprint. And so I began trying to figure that puzzle out. And in the end, when I figured it out, and then I started telling people about it, then they started asking me to speak and then to write a book. And then it just all accidentally happened because I don't know. It's like saying, hey, I figured out the winning lottery numbers. Would anyone else like to in on this, please? And then people started asking me to help.
Would you like part of the $220 million or whatever it gets
exactly.
up to? Yes. Yep. COVID time really brought out all of these things in DEI. And how do you do this from remote work, and how do you make sure that it feels like community and inclusion and all of these things? I feel like it continues to be more and more of a topic of conversation, which I think is good and bad in some instances, because we hear some horror stories that come out of some people's company culture that you're like, wow, people are really having to work through some of these things and work in these environments.
That's really my goal, is to help other organizations have a culture and have an environment that doesn't suck.
I love it. Straight to the point too, because people like to sugarcoat that. I'm like, no, it does suck sometimes. It sucks.
Yeah. And we spend way too much time at work. We spend more time at work than we do with our families generally, right? We spend more time at work with any other activity that we do in our lives, and yet it's the place of the most consternation, the most, issues and friction. And it doesn't have to.
Nope.
It's just a lack of planning and a lack of direction and a lack of really understanding who we are and what do people like us do at this company. And then you get really clear about that. And then as an employee, you can say, I love it, I'm all in, or you can say, this is not for me and I'll go somewhere else.
Do you have a definition of a winning company culture that you like to just put out there to people? And then are you able to say like, hey, here's some key signs that a culture is thriving versus we're on a little bit of rocky right here?
Well, I don't have like a quick whipped like one sentence of what makes, what is a great company culture.
Yeah.
That's really what my book is all about, is like, it's really in three parts. So one is, the first part of the book is, what do you have to do to like be good? What's the minimum viable product to have a decent company culture that does not completely suck?
Yep.
And that's the things we all think about, value statements and, what are the words on the wall and what is your culture really, what do you want it to be? The middle of the book is the seven pillars, which are the things that I was able to discover through thousands of interviews, reading hundreds of books, and picking the brains of the best minds at the time in the world that I could get on the phone, corner at a conference,
Yeah.
and distill from them that these seven things are what the greatest companies do. And then since then, I've been able to retest and test and observe this again in the best companies. And then the third part of the book is how do you get people to change? So even if you don't agree with my culture assessment, if you think I'm crazy, but you need to create change in your company, you could read the last part of my book and really get a good sense of how to create change, because that's one of the biggest issues for leaders in companies right now is that maybe they want to change, maybe they want things to get better, but they don't know how to do it
Yep.
other than kind of force people.
Yep.
And that's as important a part of the journey as anything else. So, I mean, I'm happy to kind of dive into like some of the pillars or different things, but essentially the best companies are really, really good at these certain things that are the most important to creating an environment
Yep.
that works and is fantastic and has high profits and high performance and high productivity, but works for senior management and works for the average employee and works for the client, works for the vendor. Like everyone in the ecosystem of a company has to be happy and want to be there.
Yep, absolutely. And I do want to hop into the seven pillar strategy. And, you were just teeing it up for us, and it's helped transform countless companies. Could you walk us through the most impactful pillar? Like, is there a process to work through the pillars? Do you pick one and start there? What is the process?
Usually what I advise companies to do is to look at the seven and we talk about them. And then I say, now, which one jumps out at you as being the one that you're really terrible at? And because what most people do is they will, let's say I told you all seven and you were like, okay, this one we're terrible at. But like this one, we could do a little bit better. And so people go, oh, well, let's go work on that. Let's just get a little bit better at the one that, we're okay at. We're currently getting a C plus. How can we get that to be a B?
Yep.
And that doesn't move the needle. You need to do that work eventually. But what ends up happening is they're like, okay, I did all this work and you told me we're going to get all these magical results. And like, it got a little bit better, but like my day's still kind of the same and my environment's still the same.
Yep.
Whereas you look at that one pillar and you're like, we are terrible at this. This, in fact, doesn't even exist here.
Yep.
And you go and start doing that and radical change happens. It becomes this sort of like spark,
Yep.
right? That creates a fire and people go, oh, we did some work over here and wow, look how much better it is. I want to do more. And so now they start working on the next pillar. Even though the change isn't as impactful or isn't as big as the first one they did, or maybe the first two they did, then there becomes this cumulative effect that now we've gotten a lot better at all these things. So there isn't like one pillar that universally is the one that they should work at. It's the one that you suck at, which is, if you look at our lives, right? You say, well, I don't feel healthy. Okay, well, is it your diet? Is it your exercise? Is it, there's all these different things we could think about attacking.
I love that. I love that it's not just a process you have to work through, but it's a very specific thing based on what the company's issues are. Because I think sometimes it's like a 7-step process or whatever the steps are. For this, it's very specific that you're identifying what you suck at.
Right. Absolutely.
Which is there a pillar that stands out in the time that you've been doing all of this that companies have been struggling with the most?
Sure. So transparency is without a doubt the one that comes up the most.
Okay.
Companies tend to hold key information close to the vest. They tend to not share with everybody. There's in some really toxic organizations, information is power, right? So if they hold on to it, they don't tell anyone, and you're the only one that knows how to get this thing done, and you're the only one who knows like the super secret key to make this thing work, like that somehow keeps your job security.
Yep.
And like that's terrible. So usually if I was to like if someone said we don't know which one we should work on, I would be like, well, let's go work on transparency. That's the one. And I can give you some examples of what that looks like.
Yes, absolutely. Because I feel like I've been in environments where they preach, oh, we're transparent. We love to be transparent. We're a transparent company. I'm like, no, you're not. Because
Yeah.
there is still, you could see some definite gaps.
So some ways in which transparency might show up. One would be we used to share our profit and loss statement every single month with every single employee. So we would show them the summary, not the like super crazy detail that, you could figure out what people are getting paid and stuff like that. And some companies have gone as far to show everybody what everybody gets paid. Like they've gone full transparent. And there's a spectrum here of what you're comfortable with, what your company can handle. But if you're showing them like this is how much money we made and this is what we spent our money on and this is what we were profitable or not profitable this month, that creates so much understanding from employees because they can be like, I've been asking to do all this stuff that costs money, and for the last 3 months, the company hasn't made money, right? This is not a priority. They're going to go spend more money over here on this thing. I understand why there's this resistance. It's not that they don't like my idea, they don't like me, but I'm asking them to buy me a new desk I don't really need, and we haven't made money in 3 months. Like, okay, right? So there's a different level of understanding. But then we would take the detail of that profit and loss statement and give the detail that corresponded to the department. So like the ops team would understand the detail and they could go in and look every single month and they would come up with ideas all the time. Be like, I didn't know we spent money on this. Did you know if we combined this and this, we could get a discount?
Interesting.
Right. And they would start to come up with ideas that I could never, because I'm not touching the work at that level, right? As you begin to grow. And so they would find ways. I mean, we saved like this, like just within a year, like 30 or 35% costs went down. And that was just because employees were picking up on and thinking about, understood what we were doing, how we were spending money. And they also started realizing the impact of maybe some of their wasteful activities, maybe some of the things they were doing that were costing us money that they realized, oh, I did 10 of those this month. If I could cut that down to one or two, like I'm helping the company save some significant money. So that's one way. The
Okay.
second way is like, are you sharing the company goals? That would be in the minimum viable product for culture. But
Yep.
are you sharing the department goals with everybody? And then down at the team level, are you sharing everyone's goals? Because everyone, if you're on a team, let's say you're on a team of 7 people in customer service, do you all know what each other's goals are? Because I find in most organizations, they don't. Your boss knows your goal and you know your goals, but your teammates who you work with every single day have no idea what your goals are. And so what that means is they can't help you. They can't, do anything to help you get to there and to be successful. And you are not thinking about them and what their goals are. So if you're like, hey, it's September, I've hit my goal. Like I'm going to keep doing amazing, but I've hit my goal and I can come over here and help you, Susie, because I can see you're a little behind, or
Yep.
I can see, and I know I can coach you or I can provide you some help or whatever it is. And now you're going to hit your goal too. Well, that helps the company,
So, yeah.
right? And it makes it a better place to work. So there's some weird like thing where, it's like only you and your boss know your goals. Like, what is that about? It's crazy. We would share like personality tests. We have everyone take a personality test and we put them in a giant bucket and everyone could access it. So if you felt like you were having a hard time connecting with someone or getting along with them, you could go in and read their personality assessment and be like, oh, this person hates chit chat. And what am I doing right when I get on the phone? I'm trying to do chit chat to create a rapport and try to like get along with them. And like they literally just want to get right to the point and get the business done. And you can change your behaviors a little bit to get along with this person. But so again, we're just like share as much as we could. Um, we did a monthly meeting, 30 minutes. Every department reported like very quickly what was going on, highs and lows, new hires. We would talk if somebody left or somebody got fired. We actually told everyone as much as we could. Sometimes there was some stuff around there that was not, we would say, we literally cannot tell you because there's maybe some potential liability or exposure here or whatever. But like, hey, Tom left. He decided to go to a competitor. We were actually really sad he left. And here are the things he said and why he left. And we're gonna look into it, like, and that. So instead of just being like, well, and like never even saying it, it was like Tom never existed. You ever been in those companies? Like Tom
Yeah.
leaves, and then it was like he never existed,
Yep.
right? So we talk about that stuff and figure that stuff out. I have no idea where there's a hand on my screen, but cool. I guess we're high-fiving it now.
It goes along with it.
All right, there we go. So there's all these like really clear examples of how we can share and how we can talk about things. I know I've said a lot. The last one that we did is I did a one question survey every single week. Well, 48 weeks out of the year.
Okay.
I would send one question to all the employees.
Okay.
And as the organization got bigger, we would kind of started to like break this out where maybe the head of customer service might do that for their whole team, and then the head of market, because got to be a little bit too big. But for most companies, if you're under, let's say, 500 employees, it would work to do it. Just you as the CEO could do it, or if you have a team of 5, you can do this. This exercise works just as well. Ask them one question. What's your biggest struggle? Who's killing it for you? What client's driving you nuts? What do you wish you had? What resource do you wish you had? Like, in fact, if anybody wants a list of these questions, if you want to text 33777 and put my name, Chris, in the text, I will literally send you a list of 25 starter questions to get going with that. And what you do, though, is asking is important, but then getting the answers and then telling them, right, what you're going to do about it. So, like, with half the questions, I would tell them, listen, whatever you say, don't put your name on it. It can be anonymous. I'm never going to take your answer and show anyone a very specific answer. I'm going to be very confidential. I may repeat the sentiment. You understand that I'm going to read this stuff, that I'm going to go talk to people and figure out how to fix it. But I'm never going to like show anyone your answer where someone's going to go, oh, well, I know that's Danielle. I can tell that's Danielle's. She wrote that. We're never going to do that. Half the questions, though, I would say, listen, whatever you say, I'm sharing with the whole company.
Okay.
Right? So there was different questions that had different results. So if I'm saying, who has been doing amazing this quarter? Who deserves to be called out? Then I'm going to share that with everyone, right? You're going to see all the answers. And even if you weren't the one who got the most, but you got a lot of people saying your name, you want to see that, right? It's a good thing. So then I would go back to them before I asked them the next question, and I would tell them, this is what I heard, and this is what I'm going to do about it. And sometimes it was good stuff, like, hey, I heard that Danielle's kicking ass for us. All right, awesome. So we're gonna, celebrate her, or we're gonna get her a whatever. We would figure something out, right? Everyone might be saying we're super burnt out, we're super stressed, things are crazy right now. I feel like I can't get caught up. And so I would say this is what we're gonna do. We're cutting all of our meetings back. Like I've told all the leaders to cut back, 15% of all the meetings that are currently occurring, to try to give everyone some time back so they can get their work done and feel less stressed. We're gonna do that for 3 months and see what we need to do. Like we would make adjustments on the fly.
Yep.
And so they felt heard. They saw action, right? We were transparent. And sometimes I would say, I appreciate that you all told me this terrible thing is happening and there's nothing I can do about it. And here's why. Like literally that's the law. It's literally how things have to work. I'm totally stuck. I hate it too. But they understood.
Yep.
So these are all different ways that we can be wildly transparent. And it doesn't cost any money.
Yep.
And it will make a huge difference because we can keep finding the suck. We can keep finding the terribleness that exists in between these little moments that drive people crazy, and begin to remove it or add a little grease to the clogs that are going, or whatever it is, to figure out how to make work better. And I know I've talked an obscene
Oh,
amount of time, which is ridiculous for a podcast. But I'll turn it back to you.
no, because even as you were talking, like we do hails and farewells. We have a town hall once a month that we get together, not for 30 minutes. I wish it was for 30 minutes. It goes on for an hour and 30 minutes. Um,
Everyone wishes it was 30 minutes, which is why
yes.
we always did. Yeah.
And so it's one, but we do the hails and farewells. We do they left. We so appreciate their time here. But even as you were talking about goals with your manager, we deal with it the fact that we get so siloed in our teams, even in our own department, because we have all these different just entities that we end up fighting with each other more than we do actually working collaboratively together. And it's such a headache to be able to try to figure it out because it doesn't seem like it should be such a hard thing, but it all comes back to we all just don't have eyes on everything that we're all working on. And it's that transparency element again. If a company could focus on one pillar, is transparency always going to be that pillar that stands out for you to start with? I think you said
I,
that.
I mean, only if I don't know more. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes they're transparent enough,
Yep.
and maybe they're a company that, mistakes is a pillar. And so maybe when somebody makes a mistake, like they get fired, they get yelled and screamed at, they get chastised, they get like that could be the big problem that people are walking around afraid all the time to do anything, try anything new, make a decision because their boss is a yeller and a screamer, and can get angry so quickly. Like sometimes that's the biggest problem. And so then the boss, if you go ask the boss, they're like, no one ever comes to me with good ideas. No one has any innovation. Like, and they're complaining about that, but it's like, it's because you're a jerk and you yell and scream at people when they try something and it doesn't work out. Um, so it does depend.
Yep.
I find transparency is always up high on the list. Mistakes is up high on the list. And also another one that's interesting is positivity. So positivity is a pillar, and I'm not talking about toxic positivity.
Yep.
We're not saying, hey, everything is great all the time.
Yeah.
But positivity comes, and I really kind of base this around this idea of appreciative inquiry from the School of Positive Psychology, which says, I mean, you really can't be innovative and you can't ever really trust your team and you can't really ever do anything good or great if you don't feel positive, if there isn't a sense of goodness in that room. If there's fear in the room and if there's uncertainty in the room and negativity in the room, we get status quo or worse. And so there's a whole framework on how to do this, but the simple example might be, if you're walking around the office saying, I'm a problem solver, that means you're ultimately looking for problems all day, right? You are, and it doesn't mean problems don't exist and doesn't mean we don't address things that are an issue. But the greatest leaders and the greatest organizations walk around saying, what's working? What's going well? Why is it that why is her stuff always so much better and done so much faster or whatever it is than the rest of her team? Like someone ought to be going, do you ever have those like things where, your friends and family know like you're like the top performer and they're like, does anyone ever ask you how you did it or what's, and they're like, no one cares. No one ever asked me. Like the best organizations are like, what I want to know exactly what you're doing and can you teach everybody else?
Yep.
Can you share, right? Can you take what you're doing really, really well and help us do more of that? That's the positivity pillar. And that's that thing is actually called positive dissidence, which is where is the tiny bit of positivity in the sea of complete crap, right? In a total chaos and the worst situation, but like, you know, a terrible example would be if a nuclear bomb went off, but three people survived. Why did those three people survive? That's the positive dissidence. Did
No.
they have shelter? Do they have some genetic mutation that protects them from radiation? Like you get fascinated. Like
Yeah.
why did that one person survive on the airplane crash? Like that's the positive dissonance. Why? Were they sitting in a certain seat? Did they do something special? Was it just luck? Like, and we want to do that inside of our companies and say, why is that person doing well? The whole sales team didn't meet their quota this year, but this one woman blew her quota out of the water. It's not that she's amazing and we should just leave her alone. It's no, well, why? We need to get curious. And that will help us figure out how to get better and how to innovate going forward.
Love that. I love the get curious part of that. I think it's a piece that we all need sometimes. And just to, how do we dig in just a little bit more, just a little bit into these things? I love that. I want to get into the leadership and how that funnels into culture and just from your experience, how does leadership behavior directly influence company culture?
Well, I mean, leaders are ultimately responsible for creating or destroying the culture that's there. The CEO, the owner, the senior leaders, they're ultimately responsible for setting the direction and telling us, like, this is where we're going and this is how we're going to go there and all of that. And then ultimately setting that example. And then, it goes down the ladder. Um, we know that people essentially how they view their team is how they view the culture,
Okay.
and how they view their boss is how they view the CEO.
Okay.
And especially in a large organization where maybe you've never met the CEO and you have no interaction with that person. Um, but our small little microcosm, a little world that we're in, I'm on this team of 7 people. That's my company culture. And if you have a bad interaction with Bob in accounting, you don't go, oh, well, our culture's terrible. You just say, well, Bob's terrible. But if your team is terrible and you hate being with your team, like you're like, oh, our culture sucks, right? And if your boss is terrible and does all these terrible things and no one ever stops them, our CEO must be terrible too, right? And that there's this correlation, and we see the data. I think it's Patrick Lencioni that has done a lot of this research. I could be mixing up people, but I think it's him. Um, and it showed like this direct correlation of like team score and culture score all went together. Boss score and CEO score all went together. So leaders have a huge impact in their ability to help employees enjoy their work and to do things that will help retain top talent. And they have a big, big responsibility in essentially creating that right environment.
We one of your books, it focuses purely on remote work and like the future, like this is the future of work for us. We see hybrid now, we see just full on remote. Remote work has really challenged traditional workplace culture. Like, what is the biggest mistake you've seen companies making when trying to foster culture in these different new working environments?
Remember, there was some point in our human history where we were all riding horses around,
Yep.
right? And at some point there became a car.
Yep.
And can you imagine if someone took a saddle off a horse and put it in a car and was like, well, this is a good seat, right? That's essentially what most of these idiotic companies have done and said, well, we're just going to keep doing the thing that we did when we were all together, where we had proximity on our side. We had the ability to see, touch, feel, like know you because we can experience you in person in real time. And we're going to do the same things that we're going to do when we're only on Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. And that's just stupid. Um, and that's why they have failed. And that's why the pendulum has swung a little bit back, where they want to some people back, especially you notice it's these big giant companies that are saying they're bringing people back, not these smaller companies where they can manage it a lot better. So they're trying to create environments for people that are sort of homogeneous. So if we're all in the office together, our experience is essentially the same. Our outside world has some impact on us. But if we're all working from home, our outside world has a bigger impact on our work. And that's not a negative thing. It's just something for companies to understand. So I'll give you an example. We did this big study during the pandemic, and it was very pandemic focused. So, but there are things out of that I think that are important to understand now. We saw that people who lived alone and people that lived with one person in their house, apartment, whatever it was, what they wanted from work and what they needed from the company and their boss was wildly different than what somebody who lives with a family or someone who lives with a multi-generational family. So let's just say it's, you know, you and you have your kids, or maybe you have a spouse or you don't have a spouse, but like, there's a parent and kids kind of a thing happening. And then the other household is there's parents, kids, and there's grandparents, or there's great grandkids, or whatever. And what that group of people needs is wildly different. So think about if you are someone with lots of generations and you're in a house and you're trying to work from home, what you need is for the company to leave you alone, to get your stuff done and to cut down the amount of meetings that you need. And you don't need social hour, and you don't need beer Friday, and you don't need trivia Tuesday. And like, you don't need to be forced to do a bunch of that stuff because you have plenty of social interaction in your home. You still need to connect with your team. We still need like some stuff. It's fine. But like, we don't need to create culture by forcing you to show up on Friday at 4 o'clock and have a beer with everybody. Like, you're like literally just waiting for that moment to end so you can go and pick up your kids and talk to your, whoever else lives with you or whatever. However, the people who live by themselves with one other person will tell you the complete opposite. They need more social connection. They want to have more interaction because they're lonely, because they only see one other person or nobody all day long inside their home. And if it's just them and their cat, they're pretty lonely. And so they want to be on Beer Friday, and they want Trivia Tuesday, and they
Yes.
want all of this stuff. And because they need that social interaction they're missing from work. And so companies really misfire here when they're trying to create a solution that is one size fits all for all their employees, when really it's one size fits one. And so during the pandemic, what we did is we regrouped all of our people, all of our teams. We stopped having a traditional sales meeting and it's customer service team meeting and all that. And what we did is we grouped everybody based kind of on their job, but mostly around their home situation. So people where we had salespeople, customer service people, and marketing people, and all this stuff, who were all like single or one other person in their house, and they met all the time, and they were meeting all the time, and they wanted to talk about their feelings and how they felt and what was going on, and like what bottle of wine they were going to have that night. And I mean, they needed that time and all that. And then we put the other people in the other group, and we told them like, you don't ever have to meet. You can meet, and here's the mechanism of how you meet voluntarily. Or we will do some things, but we're going to make them very lot more sparse. And they were wildly happy because they also had bandwidth problems. They had like everyone trying to do Netflix, homeschooling, all this stuff. Now, that was the pandemic. Now, it's still some of the same issues. So you need to really think about and survey your people and talk to your people about their situation, about what it looks like at home or what it looks like for them as far as like what do they need from the company,
Yep.
and then tailor your approach. Now, if you're just at one boss with 7 people you manage, figure out what's going to work best for that team. And you will find that you'll be a lot better off than just trying to, well, connection. We feel like we're not as connected, so I'm going to make everybody meet 5 more times this week, and we're going to talk about, I don't know, our feelings or whatever. It's stupid.
Yep.
We have to be much more intentional about it to be able to make it work properly.
I think I live through that right now. It's our team's not connected. Well, let me go throw 3 meetings on the calendar. So at least 3 days a week, you guys do feel connected on certain areas we need to discuss. No, we don't need to feel connected 3 times a week. Like, that's just not the reality of things. We need to be more purposeful with time. So I appreciate you saying that point, because I think we waste a lot of time sometimes with random meetings that we don't really need when there's a simpler solution to some of this.
Yeah, and if you're going to have that meeting, there's an exercise called bonding, and it's in both of the books. that I highly suggest teams should be doing. Now, I was always pushing my leaders to try to do this once a day if it made sense. They probably did it 3 times a week, which was fine. And like for some teams, like the sales team, they probably did it every day. Customer service probably did it every day. Ops probably did it 3 times a week begrudgingly. Like, research did it twice and lied and told me they did it three. Like, but we were doing it. Um, we had different groups, introverts, extroverts, and like, we had different, but the point was they got it done enough that it made a big impact. And so what you do with bonding is you go around on a meeting that's at least 30 minutes or more, and you show up and you ask everyone, how are you showing up? Now, this question is meant to be their full human, experience. How are you showing up? Because once they do this a couple times, they'll start answering really truthfully. Like, I just got a new puppy and I haven't slept well in 3 nights because we're crate training. Like, so I'm a little tired right now. Oh, that's why Danielle cut my head off this morning. It's not that she hates me. It's because, she's a little crabby because she hasn't been sleeping, right? Ah, okay. I get. And that maybe would have been something that would have come up more naturally and you would have shown me a picture of your puppy or whatever when we were all sitting in the office. But if you just come on the Zoom and then you disappear, like I don't know what's happening in your life. And then at the end of the meeting, you go around the room and ask everyone how they're leaving. And so I find this answer tends to be a bit more about them as the employee and their experience in that exact meeting we just had. So let's say we're doing this really big project for this client and we're going to meet for 30 minutes, but it's the first meeting of the morning, so we're going to do this quick exercise. We go around, how are you showing up? How are you leaving? And how are you leaving? You might say, I'm not feeling it. Like, you all think we're going to make this deadline on Friday. I'm feeling really nervous that we're not going to make this and the client's going to be pissed. And you're like, oh, okay. I didn't realize you felt that way. Like, and suddenly that sparks, maybe we need to have another meeting. We need to figure out this timeline's right, or, really dive into that concern. Instead of you just leaving the meeting upset that no one listened to you and we're never going to make this deadline. And you're going to have to be one who has to face the wrath of the client. And, so we have those interactions. There's two really, really key things that have to happen if you're the leader when you do this. First of all, you have to go last both times. So
Okay.
how are you showing up? And if everyone goes around the room and basically says they're generally doing great, they're doing fine, everything's okay, then you as the leader are allowed to share. And if you're struggling, you can say you're struggling, and that's your moment to be vulnerable and to talk to your team about what's really going on. But if one of your team members or more of your team members is like, hey, I'm really struggling, you've got to stop the meeting and do something about it and deal with that and try to help them and figure out. I mean, if you haven't slept in 4 days and you're really struggling, they're like, hey, how do we take a little bit of work off your plate? Maybe we can excuse you from a couple of meetings today. You can go take a nap. Like, if I show you as a leader, I'm listening to you and I'm going to help you do something to improve that in that moment right away, you will do anything for me the next time I ask you to do it, right? If I show you that compassion and I step up and help you in a moment when you're not doing your best, that's huge. That's culture, right? And then, but again, and if that happens, and if you're telling me that, guess what? As the leader, I don't get to say anything. I got to skip my turn. If my team's struggling, my only job is to help them, and they don't have the capacity to listen to my crap.
Yep.
And that's a tough pill to swallow as a leader,
It
to
is.
realize that, you like your team, you love your team, you want to, whatever, but like they actually don't care, or maybe it's that they don't care, but they don't have that capacity to care about your stuff too. They have their own stuff to deal with,
Yep.
right? And it's the same thing how are you all leaving? And if some of them are struggling or really not happy with what we're going to do or nervous, doesn't matter what you think. You got to go last. You got to deal with their stuff. and be will. And then that's when you go up to your boss and go complain and talk to them and get you know, get your support uphill about what's happening. So if you do that exercise, and it takes practice. If you did it just once, you're probably going to be like, you know, maybe it was okay, maybe it wasn't. But you start doing it on a regular basis, you will find incredible connection, incredible engagement, incredible feeling like you really understand, know, and love your team, right? Maybe not love, but like understand and respect or whatever the right thing is. But like you will get them, and your boss will understand what they need to do to push or to pull or to adjust about around how people are showing up and what they're doing.
I love that. And I could see it being a very an exercise that people kind of have to get into the groove of and feel comfortable with, because it's a vulnerable one to be able to sit there. And if you're not used to sharing stuff like that, if you are that introvert, it may take a little pulling to try to make sure, like,
Yeah.
get on past the initial, like, oh yeah, I'm fine, everything's great, or hunky dory, or whatever you want to say.
And we never forced anyone to tell us anything. We never made them. We never tried to coax them. We explained what we were expecting, that, hey, we could all just share how we're showing up. I mean, you and I talked right before this. We were both suffering with colds, right? That would be enough to say, hey, I've had a cold for 2 weeks. I'm not feeling 100%. That's enough information
Yeah.
for me as your boss and everyone as your teammate to understand if we're wondering why you're not your normal 100%, right? If we're not getting from you what we normally get from you, we understand why, and we can give you empathy, and we can give you a bit of a pass or a little extra patience because we know you've been sick, right? That's enough. We don't need, I've been fighting with my partner every single night for the last month, and I think we're gonna break up. Like, I'm not asking for like people to tell me their personal whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, if they want to, they can, but we never like were forcing anyone. It was just, that you could say I've been having some tough stuff going on at home with, and I don't really want to talk about it, but like, sometimes you've had people just say that. I'm like, okay, we get it. Like, you have a distraction in your life right now. Or I had this in a meeting for real. Someone came and said, yeah, I just found out this morning that my mom passed away. And I was like, I'm sorry. What? And I was like, what the F are you doing here at work? She's like, well, I had this really big thing. I really need to get to. I said, no, meeting is over,
Bye.
done. You are off. I don't want to see you the rest of the week. Like you're off. I would tell them, like, you could tell sometimes that they don't have enough days. What I'm like, you have paid leave. Go. It was not being counted against you. Your mom just passed away. But again, like how you react as a boss and what you do to help them
Yeah.
is huge.
Those meetings, you're like, what? Why are we here? What are we doing right
Right. We're going to talk about this feature that we maybe want to add to our software. Like, who cares? Like, your mom's like, no. How are we going to help you? Who's going to cover your work? We'll make sure this is all done. Like, you need to go with your family. And how can we support you? Please let us know. But we're also not going to bother you. But if
now?
you need anything from us, we are here. Right. And send flowers. And, what are
Yes.
we going to do? Right. But I was just like flabbergasted, you know?
What are we
Like,
doing?
and like later on, I was like, "Were you not close with your mom?" It's like, "No, I was really close." I'm like, How are you?" I think she was like in a state of almost like in a state of shock. Like she almost needed us. I think like the routine was like somewhat helpful for her, and it was just like, "No, we need to cut
Yeah.
the pattern here. You need to go."
Chris, as we come down to the end of our time, I do just want to end with many leaders underestimate the importance of culture, especially today as we keep progressing. What is some of the most common pushback you hear from executives, and how do you address it with them?
So there are a few. There are some executives that don't get it. They don't understand what's in it for them. And the research is clear. It's higher profits, it's higher productivity, and it's higher performance. And I don't know any senior leader that doesn't want that. what's in it for the employees is to enjoy their work, is to appreciate where they're at. I mean, the benefit of the employees is always very apparent, but for the senior leaders, sometimes it's there. Sometimes they can't see what the bottom line is going to be for them. They're going, hey, we're going to go do these things, or sometimes they think it's going to cost them all this money. I mean, I honestly cannot think of an example of anything that we ever did that cost us any sort of like
Right.
significant amount of money. Maybe we set up a survey tool, but that was nothing. Like, what we got when we kept asking people these questions and we kept talking to them and was amazing ideas and ways to save money and all this, right? So, well, sometimes with transparency, they're afraid that people are gonna, if their company's doing well, they're gonna ask for a raise. That never happened to me, not one time. That if a company's not doing well, that they're all gonna quit and leave. Again, that never happened. They just wanted me to say, hey, we are sucking. Here's why. Here's what we're going to do about it. Here's what the pipeline looks like. Here's when we think it's going to be rectified. And people, all their anxiety levels went, okay, Chris has got it. He understands what's happening. We'll be fine. Okay. Right. And then we were fine. And so the next time I told them something, they believed me even more. Um, I just think it's some like, is it worth the trouble is one of the things. Is it really going to benefit the company? Right. That's another one of the things. And I think the third thing is they all absolutely believe that they have a great company culture because they say it. And I'm a big believer in manifesting and all that kind of stuff. You can't manifest culture. It has to be intentional because you have way too many other people impacting what's happening. And so I'll talk when someone walked up to me and they're like, "Oh, you're the culture guy. We have a great culture here." I'm immediately, "No, you do not." Nobody with a great culture walks up and says, "I have a great culture."
Yeah.
Right? You don't. You maybe talk about some of the cool things you're doing or whatever, or you're proud of your people. Like it's a totally different language if you actually have a great culture. So I don't know. I don't know what the right if I answered your question eloquently enough, but there's some resistance there, but there literally is no downside to
Yep.
just trying to get a little bit better. The only thing that happens is either nothing or you got a lot better.
Yep.
Right. And so the risk is that you didn't get nothing really changed. The risk isn't that it gets worse.
Yeah. There's longevity to it if you fix it. There's
Yeah.
longevity for your company and it's better for everybody around.
And I think probably the biggest unspoken concern
Yep.
is that creating great culture, having a great company is like you're Sisyphus. You're rolling up the boulder to only have it roll back down on you, right? Or you're in a pit you can't ever crawl out of. It is a never-ending job.
Yeah.
You will never get to the point where like, well, we don't have to work on culture anymore. And that sucks, but that's the job you signed up for, right?
Yep.
You always are working on it. Your people are changing, the world changes, what people want changes, and you're always going to be working on it for as long as you work at that company and you're in a leadership role. It's always going to be, and that feels there's a level of frustration there where you're like, I just wish I could do it and then it's done,
Yep.
but
Snap my
that's not
fingers. Yeah.
right, and that's just not how it works. It's just something you always have to work on.
Yep. Absolutely. Chris, I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me and letting me hop into the world that you are working in and digging into the seven pillars and all of this. So I so appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You guys, I'm going to have Chris's books down below, all of his socials, everything. His YouTube is down there as well, so you can see a bunch of his videos. Please go give him a follow. Continue to stay up to date with everything he's doing. And as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.